How's it going, everyone? If you haven't heard yet, the Australian Senate has voted to censure everyone's favourite senator, Fraser Anning. If you don't like Fraser Anning, it probably means you're not a very good Australian. If you don't know what a censure motion is, we'll go through that in a minute. Now, I am going to do a full report on this issue, but right now I just want to go through an initial reaction just to give my thoughts on it before I do a fully measured and scripted response. So thank you so much for joining me today. Let's get right into it. Fraser Anning has been humiliated by his colleagues who labelled him pathetic and shameful in a rare show of bipartisanship. Not exactly sure how he was humiliated, and I don't think the people in the Senate are technically his colleagues, seeing as they are in opposite parties to him, so they have a different agenda to him. They're not colleagues in the Senate. They are your political opponents. Doubt he's actually been humiliated. If anything, he's been vindicated by the Senate, who have already shown themselves in the past to be extremely anti-Australian, and now these anti-Australians are showing what they do to someone who is actually pro-Australia. We'll move on. The government and opposition joined together to move a motion censuring Anning, who issued a statement just hours after the Christchurch attack, blaming it on Muslim immigration. If you haven't actually seen the statement, that's essentially what it did. He pointed out the fact that attacks wouldn't happen like that if there was no mass immigration. He also condemned the attack. A lot of these idiots are trying to say that he blamed the victims, which is completely untrue. It's actually slanderous. But this is essentially what they've done. This morning's censure motion passed on the voices with near unanimous support. Politicians in Australia are, I think, if not but one of the most distrusted individuals or people in the entire country. Not exactly sure why they think that being unanimous in this condemnation is going to win them support, seeing as the majority of the country think they're all a bunch of tools. But as they say, bipartisanship just means that both parties are screwing you over equally. The censure motion is a searing official rebuke of Anning's comments, a powerful piece of symbolism, but otherwise has no real effect on him. In other words, what they've done is say this:
He's not the Messiah, he's a very naughty boy!
They haven't done anything. They've just said that he's a bad boy, don't do it again, to which he's basically told them to shove off, and rightfully so. The Greens pushed for Anning to be suspended from the Senate, which would have been a more tangible punishment, but the motion was defeated 40-10. So, at least the Senate has not gone full totalitarian. They realise they can't just suspend people from Parliament for saying things that they don't like. All they can do is say, you're a very naughty boy. But notice that the totalitarian communist Greens are the ones who wanted to suspend him. If we are going to now suspend people for saying offensive and horrible things, well, then the Greens aren't going to be in Parliament anymore for very long. Although I think they believe that they are going to be rulers for life. They must think that they're born to rule, because they believe that they can suspend people from Parliament simply for saying things that they, the most offensive and irredeemable people in Australia, think is offensive. I think that's kind of silly, if you ask me. Anning remained defiant and unapologetic when he spoke shortly before the vote, labelling the reaction to his comments as a witch hunt. He said, "This censure motion against me is a blatant attack on free speech. It is also an exercise in left-wing virtue signalling of the worst kind. This is exactly the kind of self-righteous left-wing intolerance of alternative views that you would expect from an extremist party like the Communists." What is shocking is that a supposedly liberal Prime Minister is leading the charge. What is really being censured here is not me, it is the right of anyone to say something that those in power disagree with. Damn right. Anning said the reasons for this censure motion were barely coherent. He said, "What inflammatory and divisive comments? What blame did I attribute to the victims? I said nothing of the sort. After putting the immediate blame where it belonged, I looked for contributing causes. I identified that an immigration program that allowed Muslim fanatics to migrate to New Zealand was a key enabler of community violence. The claim that this somehow blames the victims is absurd. My real crime, of course, is that I simply told the truth." End quote for him. Anning said that the media and other politicians ignored terrorist attacks carried out by Muslims. He slammed Prime Minister Scott Morrison's response to the infamous egging incident, which happened a day after the Christchurch attack. Spot on. Spot on. If you read the statement, there is nothing wrong with it. He rightly condemned the attack. We condemn violence here. But then he pointed out the fact, and this is an undeniable fact, that if it wasn't for mass immigration, specifically of Muslims, but mass immigration in general, this kind of thing would not happen. It's a fact. You can't argue with that. And that's the problem. That is the issue that these establishment politicians have with his statements. What he said was true. They can't argue against it. And admitting it's true would mean admitting that they are the ones at fault. That should tell you everything about the moral character of the ruling class establishment right now. We need to vote for guys like Fraser Anning, or even One Nation, or any minor party that stands for freedom of speech and will stand against the major parties. Labor's Penny Wong was even harsher on Anning. Ms. Wong said the issue was broader than Anning's conduct, and some members of Parliament had failed to take on hate speech. Hate speech cannot be defended on the grounds of freedom of speech because it is an attack on our democracy. It inflicts real and direct harm, she said. What we saw tragically in the loss of life in Christchurch was where hate leads us. What a frightening and shameful comment from Penny Wong right there. Freedom of speech is the bedrock of Western civilization. Without freedom of speech, we have no Western civilization. It is that simple. Calling things like what Fraser Anning said hate speech, or even using the term hate speech unironically, is an attack on freedom of speech. There is no such thing as hate speech. Hate speech is free speech. I may disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. What is utterly shameful, what's an attack on democracy, is Penny Wong's statements here, and the statements and actions of the Australian Senate on this occasion. It's just horrendous. These people are shameful. We need to vote them out desperately before it's too late. And we got some pictures here of the man himself just smiling, like, who cares? And there he is saying, what the hell? Like, what are you talking about? Just laughing at them, and Penny Wong having a bit of a sook. Just thought that was a bit funny. Greens leader Richard Di Natale echoed her comments, saying Anning had shown himself to be a pathetic man, lacking in empathy. When you say someone has a right to be a bigot, the next step is giving them permission to act on that bigotry, Dick Natale said. Thing is, what is bigotry? Bigotry is really just extreme intolerance, specifically of other people's political views or opinions, or race, ethnicity, all that kind of thing. But it's essentially just extreme intolerance. Who is more intolerant in our political system today than the communist Greens and the far left? Obviously, they think that they have the right to be bigots because they are massive bigots. They're huge bigots. Their entire political platform is bigotry. What he's really saying is he doesn't want other people to say things that he doesn't like, so he calls it bigotry and essentially slanders them and attacks them because he doesn't have an argument against what they have to say. The Greens are pathetic. Absolutely pathetic, but I thought it was kind of funny as well. But fancy the Greens calling other people bigots. There is no one more bigoted in Parliament. Darren Hinch said Anning's Christchurch comments sank to a new level. Senator Anning tried to dismiss his grotesque comments as freedom of speech as a part of free speech. Well, I was a journalist for 5 decades, and I believe passionately in free speech, obviously not. There is an adage all journalists follow, and that is the line that you cannot shout fire in a crowded theatre. That is not free speech. That is reckless, dangerous behaviour. Unless there's actually a fire in the crowded theatre. If you don't shout fire in a crowded theatre when there is a fire in a crowded theatre, that is negligent. That's going to get people hurt. Secondly, he hasn't exactly shouted fire in a crowded theatre anyway. He's just told the truth about mass immigration and Islamic migration and Islam as an ideology in general. Darren Hinch obviously doesn't believe in free speech, or he doesn't know what freedom of speech actually is. Notice how he hasn't actually counted anything that Fraser Anning had to say. It's because he can't. And finally, One Nation abstained from the vote. Pauline Hanson was not in the Senate, but Peter Giorgio spoke in her place, saying the party would not participate in the public flogging of a senator. And good on One Nation for having the character to simply say, we're going to have no part of this. Shows you that even if Fraser Anning doesn't get re-elected, which I think is actually likely that he will get elected now, because he's getting a lot of exposure and people tend to like him. But even if he doesn't, then One Nation are probably going to win seats, or some other minor party are going to win seats. I will link to this article in the description so you can go and have a read of it, and you'll have a look at the comments here, and you'll notice that most people actually support him. Gets my vote. He stands up against the bullies of the leftists and colleagues, guys independent, you can't even get that right, etc, etc. So the majority of Australians actually support Fraser Anning. His vote's only going to go up after this, and people are only going to distrust mainstream politicians even more because they are directly assaulting our freedom of speech and they're making absolute fools out of themselves. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Share the truth around, and I'll see ya when I see ya.